Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you that some 1961 Lincoln pennies have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and many are still sitting unnoticed in jars, drawers, and old collections across America? Today, we're diving into the story of the 1961 mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks ordinary, but behind this small copper coin is a fascinating piece of American history, surprising collector demand, and a few rare versions that could be worth far more than 1 cent. The 1961 penny was minted in Denver, which is why it carries the small D mint mark below the date on the front of the coin. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like all Lincoln cents since 1909, and on the back, it shows the Lincoln Memorial, a design used from 1959 through 2008. This coin was produced during a time when America was changing fast, politically, economically, and culturally, and the penny quietly reflects that moment in history. In 1961, the United States was entering a new decade. John F. Kennedy had just become president. The space race was heating up. Civil rights movements were gaining momentum, and behind the scenes, the U.S. Mint was working around the clock to produce enough coins for a growing population and a booming economy. That year, more than 1 billion pennies were minted in Denver alone. That sounds like a massive number. And it is, but that doesn't mean every 1961 penny is common in collectible condition. Most were used heavily in everyday transactions and became scratched, worn, and damaged over time. Finding one in high-grade condition today is surprisingly difficult, and that's where real value starts to appear. The design of the 1961 penny comes from sculptor Victor David Brenner, whose portrait of Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Lincoln's profile faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" across the top, "Liberty" on the left, and the date on the right, with the small D mint mark just below. On the reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial stands proudly in the center. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny seated Lincoln statue inside the memorial, a detail many people never notice. Along the top reads "United States of America," along the bottom 1 cent, and above the memorial, "E pluribus unum," meaning "out of many, one." The metal composition of the 1961 penny is another important detail. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. This means it weighs about 3.11 grams and has a rich reddish-brown color when well preserved. These are often called copper cents, and many collectors prefer them over modern zinc pennies because of their weight, feel, and historical connection to earlier American coinage. So if over 1 billion were made, why would anyone pay serious money for one? The answer lies in condition, rarity within grades, and minting errors. Most 1961 pennies were heavily circulated. They were dropped in pockets, scraped across counters, rolled in machines, and tossed into jars. As a result, finding one that still looks brand new with full original mint luster, sharp details, and no wear is extremely rare today. These top-condition coins are called mint state coins, and the higher the grade, the rarer and more valuable the coin becomes. For example, a worn 1961 penny is usually worth just 1 to 3 cents. Even a lightly circulated one might be worth only 5 or 10 cents. But a mint state example in high grades like M-66 or M-67 can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. In one major auction, a 1961 penny graded M-67, read by a professional grading service, sold for over $3,000. That's for a single penny, not gold, not silver, just copper, in extraordinary condition. But condition isn't the only factor. Some 1961 pennies were struck with errors, and error coins are especially popular with collectors because they are unique, accidental, and often visually dramatic. One of the most sought-after errors is the double die penny. This happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression, causing parts of the design, usually the date or lettering, to appear doubled. On genuine doubled die coins, the doubling is crisp and clearly separated, not blurry or smeared. Another valuable error is the off-center strike, where the coin design is misaligned and part of it is missing. Some 1961 D pennies were struck significantly off-center while still showing the date and mint mark, making them highly desirable. There are also repunched mint mark errors, where the D was punched into the die more than once, leaving visible doubling or shifting. These can be subtle, but under magnification they stand out and collectors pay strong premiums for them. Die cracks, clipped planchets, broad strikes, and weak strikes also exist for this year, and depending on how dramatic they can increase a coin's value dramatically. Now let's talk about how to identify a real 1961 D penny and avoid fakes or altered coins. First, check the date. It should read 1961, and the mint mark should be a small d located just below the date. If the mint mark looks unusually large, uneven, or poorly shaped, it could be added later, a common trick in altered coins. Next, weigh the coin. A genuine copper 1961 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A significant difference could indicate damage, alteration, or a reproduction. Look at the color. Natural copper cents range from deep brown to bright red, depending on how well they were preserved. Coins that look artificially bright or oddly shiny may have been cleaned, which lowers their value. Examine the lettering and details. On real coins, the edges of letters and numbers are sharp and well-defined. Blurry or soft-looking details could indicate wear or casting, a red flag for counterfeits, though full fake pennies are rare compared to altered ones. If you think you found something special, especially a high-grade coin or an error, professional grading services like PCGS or NGC can authenticate and grade your coin, giving it credibility and helping determine its true market value. Now here's something that surprises many people. Even though over 1 billion 1961 D pennies were minted, only a tiny fraction survive today in top condition. Most were used heavily or lost over time. That means fewer than you'd expect remain in pristine, collector-grade shape, and that scarcity drives serious competition among collectors. Another fun fact: the Lincoln Memorial reverse design used on this coin was only in circulation for about 50 years, from 1959 to 2008. After that, it was replaced by other designs. Today, that memorial reverse instantly places a penny in a specific era of American history, one tied to post-war growth, Cold War tension, and social change. Another interesting detail is that 1961 was one of the last years before the U.S. Mint began seriously considering changes to penny composition due to rising copper prices. Just over 2 decades later, in 1982, pennies shifted to mostly zinc. That makes all Preminus 1,982 copper pennies, including the 1961 D, especially appealing to collectors and hoarders alike. Collectors love the 1961 D penny for several reasons. First, it's affordable. Even high-quality examples can sometimes be found at reasonable prices compared to rare gold or silver coins. This makes it an excellent entry point for new collectors. Second, it's challenging. Finding a truly high-grade example, one with blazing red luster, no spots, no wear, and perfect strikes, is much harder than it sounds. That hunt is part of what makes this coin exciting. Third, error collectors love it. The Denver Mint produced so many pennies in 1961 that mistakes were inevitable, and those mistakes created rare and valuable variations that continue to surface today. And finally, there's nostalgia. Many Americans alive today grew up using these exact pennies. They were in lunch money, parking meters, piggy banks, and cash registers across the country. Holding one today feels like touching a piece of everyday American life from more than 60 years ago. Now let's talk about real-world value examples. A typical circulated 1961D penny might sell for 1 to 5 cents. A bright, uncirculated example could bring anywhere from 50 cents to several dollars. A professionally graded M. 65 red might sell for $10 to $30. But once you reach M. 66 or higher, prices can jump dramatically, sometimes reaching several $100s or more. Top-tier examples graded M. 67 red have sold for thousands at auction, especially when demand is high and supply is extremely limited. Error coins can go even higher, depending on the type and severity of the mistake. But the most exciting part is this. Many people already own these coins and don't realize it. They're sitting in old jars, inherited collections, dresser drawers, and forgotten envelopes. And while most are common, it only takes one exceptional piece, one perfect coin or rare error, to turn pocket change into something truly valuable. So if you come across a 1961D penny, don't dismiss it. Look at the surface. Is it shiny and red or dull and brown? Are the details sharp? Do the letters and numbers look doubled? Is the coin centered properly? Does the mint mark look clean and original? These small details can make the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. What makes the 1961D penny especially fascinating is that it represents a moment when American coinage was still deeply tied to copper, tradition, and craftsmanship. Before automation, cost-cutting, and modern alloys changed the feel of everyday money forever. It's a coin that traveled through vending machines, movie theaters, school lunchrooms, and gas stations during one of the most transformative decades in American history. And somehow, some of them survived in nearly perfect condition, waiting to be discovered. Collectors today love this coin not because it's flashy, but because it tells a quiet story. A story of mass production, everyday commerce, and the beauty hidden in ordinary objects. A story of how even the most common coin can become rare, valuable, and meaningful over time. And that's the real magic of the 1961D Lincoln penny. It reminds us that treasure doesn't always look like gold or silver. Sometimes, it looks like a single copper cent, worn, overlooked, and forgotten, until someone takes a closer look. So the next time you see a penny dated 1961 with a small D beneath the date, don't toss it aside. You might be holding a small piece of American history, and in rare cases, you might be holding something far more valuable than you ever imagined. Because in the world of coins, the most powerful discoveries aren't always the rarest or oldest. Sometimes, they're the ones hiding in plain sight. Most people walk past pennies every day without a second thought. But what if I told you one ordinary-looking penny from 1970 could be worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and many people have already spent it without ever knowing? Today, we're uncovering the fascinating story behind the 1970D Lincoln penny, a coin hiding rare secrets in plain sight. The 1970D Lincoln cent is a 1-cent coin minted in Denver, marked with a small D just below the date on the front of the coin. At first glance, it looks almost identical to millions of other pennies in circulation. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right, and the Lincoln Memorial stands proudly on the back. But what makes this penny special isn't how common it looks. It's what lies beneath its surface and in the tiny details collectors search for. To understand why this coin matters, we need to go back to 1970. The United States was in the middle of major cultural and economic change. The Vietnam War was ongoing, inflation was rising, and the country was adjusting to a new era of modern life. But one thing that hadn't changed was the humble penny. The Lincoln cent had been in circulation since 1909, created to honor Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday and designed by Victor David Brenner. By 1970, pennies were being produced in massive quantities to keep up with everyday commerce. That year alone, the Denver Mint struck more than 2.5 billion Lincoln cents. That's billion with a B. So at first glance, it seems impossible that any 1970 penny could be valuable. With that many made, how could one stand out? But coin collecting isn't just about how many coins were made. It's about condition, mistakes, metal composition, and tiny variations that most people never notice. And in 1970, something unusual happened, something that would later make certain Lincoln cents from this year some of the most hunted modern pennies in America. Let's talk about what this coin is made of. The 1970 penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This was the standard bronze alloy used for Lincoln cents from 1962 through 1982, before copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to switch to cheaper zinc-based coins. That high copper content gives the 1970 penny its warm reddish-brown color, a look collectors love, especially when the coin has never circulated and still shines like it did the day it was struck. On the front, you'll see Lincoln's portrait, along with the words "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date 1970. Just below the date is the small D mint mark, showing it was struck in Denver. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, with tiny statues of Lincoln inside, a design used from 1959 to 2008. So far, nothing seems unusual, but this is where things get interesting. In 1970, the U.S. Mint also produced pennies at the San Francisco Mint, many of which were struck using older 1969 dies by mistake. These coins became famous as the 1970s small date variety, one of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered. While that famous error belongs to San Francisco, collectors soon realized that 1970 pennies from all mints deserved closer attention, including Denver. And while the 1970 penny doesn't have a famous small-date variety like its San Francisco cousin, it does have its own share of rare and valuable errors that make certain examples extremely desirable. One of the most exciting errors found on 1970 pennies is the double die obverse. This happens when the coin die receives multiple impressions slightly out of alignment, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On these coins, collectors may see doubling in the words "Liberty," "In God We Trust," or the date itself. To the untrained eye, it may look like simple wear or damage, but under magnification, true doubling shows clear separation between letters and numbers, and that's where the value skyrockets. Some double-die 1970 pennies have sold for hundreds, and in high-grade condition, even over $1,000. Another prized error is the off-center strike. These happen when the coin blank isn't properly aligned in the press, causing part of the design to be missing. Depending on how dramatic the misalignment is, and whether the date and mint mark are still visible, these coins can be worth anywhere from $50 to several $100s. Then there are clipped planchets, where part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, leaving a curved or jagged edge. These errors often look dramatic and are very popular with collectors. But even without errors, condition alone can turn an ordinary 1970 penny into something special. Most pennies spend their lives bouncing around pockets, cash registers, and jars, collecting scratches, stains, and wear. But a small number escape circulation entirely. These coins are called uncirculated, and if preserved carefully, they can still show their original mint luster, that bright, reflective shine that makes copper look almost fiery under light. In the coin collecting world, condition is measured using a grading scale from 1 to 70. A perfect coin would score 70, but even scores in the high 60s are extremely rare for older copper pennies. A 1970 penny graded MS67 or higher by a professional service like PCGS or NGC can sell for hundreds of dollars, sometimes more, depending on eye appeal. In fact, one pristine 1970 penny graded MS67 red has sold at auction for over $1,000. That's more than 100,000 times its face value, for a coin most people would barely glance at. But the most valuable examples are those that combine high grade with rare errors. A sharp, Red, double-die 1970D penny in top condition can bring several $1,000s in the right auction. So how do you know if you might have one? Start by looking at the date. It should read 1970 with a small d below it. Then examine the coin's surface. Does it look unusually clean and shiny for its age? That could be a sign of an uncirculated coin. Next, grab a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom and inspect the lettering. Look closely at Liberty and In God We Trust. Do any letters appear doubled or thicker than normal? Check the numbers in the date too, especially the 7 and the 0. True doubled dies show clear separation, not blurry shadows or damage. Then check the edges and shape of the coin. Is it perfectly round, or does it look clipped or off-center? Does the design reach all the way to the rim evenly? Any unusual shapes or missing areas could indicate a mint error. It's also important to know what not to trust. Many fake errors are created by people damaging coins on purpose, trying to make them look rare. These usually show rough edges, gouges, or flattened areas that don't match genuine mint errors. Real mint errors happen during production and usually look clean and natural. Not most people walk past this coin every day without a second thought. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But some 1976D Lincoln pennies have quietly sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and most owners never realize what they're holding. Let's talk about the 1976D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that came from one of the most historic years in American history and still carries surprises today. The year 1976 was special for the United States. It marked the nation's 200th birthday, the bicentennial, and Americans everywhere were celebrating freedom, history, and independence. While special designs appeared on quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins that year, the Lincoln penny kept its familiar look. But behind that familiar face was a coin that tells a story of changing metals, massive production, and hidden value. The 1976D penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries a small D mint mark below the date on the front of the coin. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like most pennies since 1909, and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, a design used from 1959 through 2008. At first glance, this coin doesn't stand out. No fireworks, no special anniversary design, no bold lettering, just a simple penny. But sometimes the most ordinary coins are the ones hiding the most interesting stories. To understand this penny, we need to look at what was happening in the mid-1970s. The U.S. Mint was dealing with rising metal prices, especially copper. Pennies had traditionally been made of mostly copper, but by the early 1970s, copper was becoming too expensive. So in 1974, the Mint began switching to copper-plated zinc cents, pennies that looked like copper but had a zinc core. By 1976, that transition was complete. The 1976D penny is made of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating, giving it the familiar color but a lighter weight than older pennies. This change may sound small, but it marked the end of an era for solid copper cents and changed how pennies would be made forever. The Denver Mint struck an enormous number of these coins. In fact, over 4.2 billion 1976D pennies were produced. That makes it one of the highest mintage pennies in U.S. history. And usually, high mintage means low value. But as collectors know, rarity isn't always about how many were made. It's about condition, errors, and survival, and that's where this penny becomes interesting. Let's talk about the design. On the front or obverse, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing right. The word liberty appears to the left of his face. The date, 1976, sits to the right with the small D mint mark just below it. Above Lincoln's head are the words In God We Trust. On the back, or reverse, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial with the statue of Lincoln faintly visible inside the building. Across the top are the words United States of America, and across the bottom is 1 cent, with EPLURIBUSUNUM above the memorial. Again, nothing unusual on the surface. But when you look closely, that's where things get interesting. Some 1976 D pennies were struck with errors, and errors are where collectors pay serious attention. One of the most desirable types is the double die error, where parts of the lettering or numbers appear doubled due to a mistake during the coin-making process. On certain examples, the date or the word Liberty shows clear doubling under magnification. Another collectible error is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin isn't properly positioned during striking, causing the design to appear shifted toward one edge. If the date is still visible and the strike is dramatic, these coins can bring strong prices. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing because the metal strip was improperly cut before striking. These errors often look like a smooth bite was taken out of the coin and can be worth far more than face value. Some 1976 D pennies also show weak strikes or die cracks, raised lines on the surface caused by cracks in the coin dies. While minor examples aren't valuable, strong or dramatic ones attract collector interest. But the biggest value factor for this penny isn't errors alone. It's condition. Most 1976 D pennies went straight into circulation. They were spent, scratched, dropped, and worn down over decades. But a small number were preserved in mint condition, coins that were never used, never damaged, and still show full original shine. In coin grading, condition is measured on a scale from 1 to 70. A perfect coin would be graded MS70, though that's extremely rare for circulated coins. Even MS66 or MS67 coins are considered very high grade. A typical circulated 1976 D penny is worth exactly 1 cent. No more, no less. But an uncirculated example in high-grade condition can be worth anywhere from $5 to $50. And the very finest known examples, graded MS67 or higher, have sold for hundreds of dollars. In one public auction, a 1976 D penny graded MS67 red sold for over $1,000. That's $1,000 for a coin that most people would ignore in their pocket change. And error coins. Some off-center strikes or double dies from this year have sold for $100 to $500 or more, depending on how dramatic and clear the error is. So how do you know if your 1976 D penny might be special? First, check the mint mark. Look just below the date. If there's a small D, it was made in Denver. No mint mark means Philadelphia. Next, examine the condition. Does the coin still shine? Are the details sharp? Are Lincoln's hairlines crisp? Can you see the steps of the Lincoln Memorial clearly? If the coin looks dull, brown, scratched, or worn, it's likely only worth face value. Now look closely at the lettering and numbers. Use a magnifying glass if possible. Do any letters look doubled or thicker than normal? Is the date unusually bold or distorted? That could indicate a double die. Check the edges and shape. Is the coin perfectly round or does it look clipped or misshapen? Does the design sit off-center? These could be mint errors. Also, weigh the coin if you can. A normal 1976 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more or less, it may be a wrong planchet error or damaged, and some wrong planchet coins can be extremely valuable. Now let's talk about fakes, because yes, even pennies get counterfeited. Most fake 1976 D pennies aren't complete forgeries, they're altered coins. Someone might take a regular penny and try to add doubling, file the edges to simulate clipping, or manipulate the surface to imitate errors. These usually look rough under magnification and often show tool marks or unnatural textures. A real mint error will always look smooth, natural, and consistent with how coins are struck. If something looks scratched, carved, or uneven, it's probably post-mint damage, not a genuine error. If you believe you've found something valuable, the safest move is to have it examined by a professional coin dealer or send it to a third-party grading service. They can authenticate, grade, and protect your coin, which also increases its resale value. Now here's something most people don't realize. Even though billions of these coins were made, fewer than 1% survive in top collector condition today. Why? Because nobody saved them. In 1976, people weren't thinking about saving zinc pennies. They were spending them, tossing them into jars, or letting them corrode over time. Zinc pennies are especially vulnerable to damage because once the copper coating wears through, the zinc underneath corrodes quickly. This is why high-grade 1976 pennies are surprisingly scarce, especially those with full original red color and no spotting. Another surprising fact: the 1976 penny marks the midpoint between two eras. It comes after the end of solid copper cents and before the rise of modern commemorative coin designs. It represents a quiet transition period in U.S. coinage, making it more historically important than it first appears. And here's something fun. During the bicentennial year, many Americans saved coins thinking they would become valuable. But most people saved quarters and half dollars with special designs, not pennies. Ironically, some of the rarest high-grade survivors today are the coins nobody thought to save, including certain Lincoln cents like the 1976 D. Collectors also love this coin because it's approachable. You don't need thousands of dollars to start collecting. You can search rolls from the bank. You can check your pocket change. You can go through old jars in your home. And yet, there's still the possibility, however small, of finding something truly special. It's a reminder that treasure doesn't always look like treasure. Sometimes it looks like a penny. And this coin connects us directly to American history. Think about what was happening in 1976. Families were watching fireworks for the bicentennial. Gas stations still had analog pumps. Typewriters filled offices. People carried cash everywhere. And somewhere in that moment, this very coin might have passed from hand to hand, buying a newspaper, a soda, or a piece of candy, quietly becoming part of everyday life. Now it sits decades later, waiting to be noticed again. So why do collectors still care about the 1976 D penny? Because it represents the intersection of massive production and quiet rarity. Because it's one of the first full years of copper-plated zinc cents. Because high-grade examples are far scarcer than people expect. And because mint errors from this year continue to surface, even today, from old rolls and collections that haven't been searched yet. It's also a perfect example of how coin collecting isn't just about age. It's about condition, history, survival, and the stories hidden in small details. And here's the most exciting part. There are still millions of 1976 D pennies sitting in drawers, jars, piggy banks, and storage boxes across the country. Most of them are ordinary, but some, just a few, are extraordinary. And nobody knows where the next one will surface. Maybe it's already in your house. So the next time you come across a 1976 penny with a small D under the date, don't rush past it. Hold it up to the light. Look at the surface. Check the details. Because what looks like spare change could quietly be a collectible or even a four-figure coin. And that's the magic of coin collecting. History doesn't always sit in museums. Sometimes it sits in your pocket, waiting to be seen. If you enjoyed learning about the 1976 D Lincoln penny, stay curious, because the most ordinary coins often have the most extraordinary stories, and the next one might already be in your hands. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. It looks ordinary, common, almost invisible. But what if I told you that some 1979 D Lincoln pennies have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and many people have unknowingly spent them at gas stations, grocery stores, and vending machines? Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1979 D mint mark Lincoln penny. Where it came from, why it exists, what makes certain versions valuable, and how to know if the one in your pocket might be worth far more than 1 cent. Let's start with what this coin actually is. The 1979 D Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries a small D below the date on the front of the coin. It features Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back, part of a design that had been used since 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. By 1979, this design had already been in circulation for 20 years. Americans had seen it in their pockets, purses, and piggy banks for decades. But behind this familiar look was a year filled with economic stress, rising inflation, and major changes in how coins were made. The late 1970s were difficult years for the U.S. economy. Gas shortages, rising prices, and uncertainty were everywhere. The government was under pressure to keep producing affordable coinage while dealing with rising metal costs. Copper prices were climbing fast, and it was becoming expensive to make a 1-cent coin that actually contained close to 1 cent's worth of metal. Even though the big change to zinc-based pennies wouldn't officially happen until 1982, the mint was already preparing for that shift. In 1979, pennies were still made primarily of copper, but production methods were evolving, and quality control challenges were becoming more noticeable, which would lead to something collectors always love: errors. In 1979, the Denver Mint produced over 4 billion pennies. That's billion with a B on the surface. That sounds like it should make this coin completely worthless, and in most cases it is. A typical worn 1979 D penny is usually worth exactly 1 cent. But collectors don't look at coins the way most people do. They look for condition, rarity within the year, unusual errors, and unusual variations. And that's where the story of the 1979 D penny becomes fascinating. Let's talk about the design. On the front, you'll see Abraham Lincoln facing to the right, with the word Liberty on the left side and the date 1979 on the right. Below the date is the small D mint mark, showing it was struck in Denver. Along the top rim are the words "In God We Trust." On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, with the statue of Lincoln faintly visible inside the building if you look closely. Across the top are the words United States of America, and along the bottom is 1 cent. Between them is the phrase EPLURIBUS UNUM. By 1979, this design was deeply familiar to Americans, but something interesting was happening behind the scenes. Coin dies were wearing out faster due to massive production volumes. Minting machines were running at full capacity, and quality control wasn't always perfect. That combination created one of the most exciting things in coin collecting: mint errors. Some 1979 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning part of the design is missing. Others were double-struck, where part of the image appears twice. Some show weak or missing letters. Others have unusual metal flaws, cracks, or distorted rims. And some rare examples were struck on the wrong type of metal planchet altogether. While most people see these as damaged coins, collectors see them as one-of-a-kind historical accidents, and that's where real value can begin. Another key factor is condition. Coins are graded on a scale from heavily worn to mint state, meaning they've never been circulated and still retain their original luster. A typical circulated 1979 D penny might be dull, scratched, and brown in color. But a high-grade mint state example, especially one with strong detail, bright surfaces, and no wear, can be worth many times face value. Some pristine examples graded at the highest levels by professional grading services have sold for over $100, sometimes several $100s. And when combined with a rare mint error, values can climb into the thousands. Now let's look at real-world auction results. High-grade 1979 D pennies in mint state condition have sold at auction for anywhere from $50 to over $300, depending on the quality and eye appeal. But error coins are where things get truly interesting. Off-center strikes from 1979 D have sold for $200 to $600. Double-struck examples have reached similar levels. Dramatic mint errors, especially those that are visually obvious and well-preserved, have sold for over $1,000 in some collector auctions. These aren't rumors. These are documented sales. Coins that once passed through grocery store cash registers ended up in collectors' cases, and sometimes auction houses, fetching hundreds or thousands of dollars. But what makes the 1979 D penny especially appealing is this. Millions of them are still out there, quietly sitting in jars, drawers, old wallets, and forgotten coin collections. And most people have never checked them closely. So what exactly should you look for? First, check the mint mark. A genuine 1979 D penny will have a small d below the date. If there's no mint mark, it was struck in Philadelphia. Both versions exist, but today we're focusing on the Denver issue. Next, look at the condition. Is the coin shiny with sharp details? Can you see fine lines in Lincoln's hair? Are the letters crisp and clean? Does the coin still have some original red or reddish color instead of dark brown? These signs suggest higher grade, which can mean higher value. Then look for errors. Check if the image is centered. If part of Lincoln's face or the lettering is missing or pushed toward the edge, that's an off-center strike. Look closely at the letters and numbers. Do any of them look doubled or blurred? That could be doubling from the die. Examine the edges. Is the rim uneven or cracked? Is the coin unusually thick or thin? Does it weigh differently from a normal penny? Normal 1979 pennies weigh about 3.11 grams because they are mostly copper. If your coin weighs noticeably more or less, it could indicate a wrong planchet error, which is rare and highly collectible. Now let's talk about something important: fakes and altered coins. While most 1979 D pennies aren't worth enough to attract serious counterfeiters, some people try to alter common coins to imitate errors. They may scratch the surface, flatten areas, or damage rims to make coins look unusual. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you some 1985 D Lincoln cents have quietly sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and one tiny detail could turn pocket change into something far more valuable? Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1985 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans have handled, yet very few truly understand. This is a coin that looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and spends ordinary, but in the right condition or with the right error, it becomes something collectors chase hard. Let's take a closer look. The 1985 D Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see the small d just below the date on the front of the coin. It belongs to the famous Lincoln Memorial Cent series, a design that ran from 1959 to 2008 and became one of the most recognized coins in American history. In 1985, the United States was deep into a period of economic change. Inflation from the 1970s had slowed, but production costs for coins were still a major concern. Copper prices had risen so much that the U.S. Mint had already switched from solid copper pennies to copper-plated zinc in 1982. By 1985, this new composition was standard, and billions of these cents were being struck to meet everyday demand. That year alone, the Denver Mint produced over 4.3 billion Lincoln pennies. That's billion with a B so on the surface. This coin doesn't sound rare at all. In fact, it's one of the most common pennies ever made. But here's where the story gets interesting. Just because a coin was made in massive numbers doesn't mean every example is common. Most of those billions were spent, scratched, dropped, and worn down over decades. Very few survived in perfect condition, and even fewer left the mint with rare mistakes that collectors now pay serious money for. Let's start with the design. On the front of the coin, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's profile facing right. This portrait was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner in 1909 and remains the longest-running design in U.S. coinage history. Above Lincoln's head are the words "In God We Trust." To the left is the word liberty. To the right is the date, 1985, with a small D mint mark beneath it, showing it was struck in Denver. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the design. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated between the pillars. Above it reads United States of America, and below it is 1 cent. Along the top is the Latin phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many one. The metal composition is 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating. These coins weigh about 2.5 grams, compared to the older copper cents that weighed over 3 grams. That change saved the mint millions of dollars each year. Now let's talk about what makes the 1985 D penny special. Most circulated examples are worth exactly 1 cent. But in high condition, meaning no wear, strong shine, and clean surfaces, values begin to rise. A well-preserved 1985 D penny graded in mint state can sell for several dollars. But the real excitement comes from rare errors and top-grade coins. One of the most valuable varieties is the 1985 D double die penny. A double die occurs when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during manufacturing, causing parts of the design to appear doubled, especially letters, numbers, or Lincoln's features. On certain 1985 D cents, collectors have found noticeable doubling in God We Trust, the date, and parts of Lincoln's face. These are not tiny machine vibrations. True double die errors show clear, rounded doubling that looks like a shadow image next to the letters. And when confirmed, these coins can bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on strength and condition. Another valuable error seen on some 1985 D pennies is the off-center strike. These happen when the blank planchet isn't properly aligned during striking, leaving part of the design missing and blank metal exposed. Dramatic off-center strikes with full dates and mint marks are especially desirable. Then there are clipped planchets, where a piece of metal was missing before the coin was struck, leaving a curved bite-shaped edge. If the clipping happened during the minting process and shows proper metal flow, collectors love these. There are also weak strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, and grease-filled dies that cause missing letters or faded areas. Individually, these might not seem impressive, but to collectors, mint errors tell a story of what went wrong behind the scenes at the U.S. Mint. Now let's talk about real-world value. Most circulated 1985 D pennies are worth face value, 1 cent. But uncirculated examples in strong condition can sell for $1 to $5. Coins graded MS67 red by professional grading services have sold for $100 to $300 or more, depending on demand and eye appeal. Verified double die examples have sold for several $100s, and in high grades, some have reached into the four-figure range. Certain off-center strikes and dramatic mint errors have also sold for hundreds of dollars at auction. These aren't fantasy numbers. These are real results from real collectors. And what makes it exciting is this: millions of Americans still have jars, drawers, and rolls of pennies sitting around. Many of those include 1985 D cents. Most people have never checked them under magnification. Most have never looked for doubling or errors, which means valuable examples are still out there, hiding in plain sight. So how do you identify a real one? First, look at the date and mint mark. You want to see 1985 with a small d below the date on the front of the coin. Next, examine the surface condition. Is the coin shiny or dull? Are the details sharp or worn flat? Coins with strong luster and clean surfaces are more desirable. Then check for doubling. Use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom and inspect the words "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date. True double dies will show clear separation between images, not just blurry shadows or worn edges. Also check the edges. Are they smooth and even? Or is there a curved missing section suggesting a clipped planchet? Look at the shape. Is the coin centered? Or is part of the design missing with blank metal on one side? You should also weigh the coin if possible. A normal 1985 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. A significant difference could indicate an error or damage. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to file edges, scratch surfaces, or chemically treat pennies to make them appear unusual. Real mint errors usually show smooth metal flow and natural surfaces, not sharp tool marks or rough textures. If you believe you've found something special, the best next step is to show it to a reputable coin dealer or submit it to a professional grading service. Authentication protects you from selling something rare too cheaply or buying something fake. Now for some fun facts. Even though the Lincoln Memorial design ran for nearly 50 years, many Americans never realized Lincoln's statue appears on the reverse. On higher-grade coins, you can even see his seated position clearly between the columns. Another interesting detail: the switch to zinc cores in 1982 means modern pennies like the 1985D can corrode from the inside if the copper plating cracks. That's why you'll sometimes see bubbling or dark spots on these coins, something collectors try to avoid. Also, Denver-minted coins tend to show slightly different strike characteristics. Imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, but might actually be worth far more than 1 cent. No gold shine, no special markings, just a quiet copper coin most people would never look at twice. But what if I told you that a 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark has surprised collectors, sparked bidding wars, and turned spare change into real money? Today, we're uncovering the true story behind this overlooked coin and why you might already own one. The coin we're talking about is the 1988 Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark. That means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint, where coins traditionally don't carry a mint mark. At first glance, it looks like any other modern penny. Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. A smooth brown or reddish color. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. But behind this quiet design is a story of massive production, hidden variations, and rare mistakes that collectors search for every day. To understand why the 1988 penny matters, we need to go back to the late 1980s. America was changing fast. Technology was rising. Inflation was shaping everyday life, and cash still ruled daily transactions. In 1988 alone, the U.S. Mint produced over 5.2 billion Lincoln cents at the Philadelphia Mint. That's billion with a B. These pennies were meant for everyday use: grocery stores, gas stations, vending machines, not collectors. But history has a way of turning ordinary objects into treasures, especially when something unusual slips through unnoticed. The Lincoln cent design itself has deep roots. Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the penny in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1988, that design had already been in circulation for nearly 80 years. On the front, you see Lincoln facing right, along with the words "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the year 1988. On the back, instead of the wheat stalks seen on older pennies, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial with a tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the columns, a detail most people never notice. But the real story begins when we talk about what this penny is made of. In 1988, the U.S. Mint was no longer producing solid copper pennies. Rising copper prices forced a major change in 1982. From that point forward, pennies were made of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating on the outside. So while the 1988 penny looks like copper, it's actually mostly zinc underneath. That change might sound boring, but it created opportunities for rare errors. And errors are where the real value begins. Most 1988 no-mint mark pennies are only worth face value, 1 cent, especially if they're worn from circulation. But certain versions of this coin are highly collectible. Some are worth several dollars. Others have sold for hundreds. And in rare cases, error coins from this year have reached into the thousands. One of the most valuable errors collectors search for is the double die penny. This happens when the coin die strikes the design slightly misaligned, creating a doubling effect on letters or numbers. On some 1988 pennies, especially rare varieties, you can see doubling on the date the word Liberty, or In God We Trust. To the naked eye, it may look like the letters have shadows or thick edges. Under magnification, the doubling becomes clear. These coins can sell anywhere from $50 to over $500, depending on clarity and condition. Another valuable variation is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin isn't properly aligned when struck, causing part of the design to be missing, while another part looks stretched. Some 1988 off-center pennies have sold for $100 to $300 or more, depending on how dramatic the error is. Then there are clipped planchets, coins missing a curved chunk from the edge, caused by mistakes during metal sheet cutting. These unusual shapes instantly catch a collector's eye and often sell for $30 to several $100s. But perhaps the most exciting category is transitional and composition errors. Since pennies were made of zinc with copper plating, any mistake in metal bonding could cause peeling, bubbling, or exposed zinc surfaces. These defective coins are extremely collectible, especially when the copper coating flakes dramatically. Some examples have sold for over $200. Now let's talk about real auction results. A high-grade 1988 no-mint mark penny in near-perfect condition, graded MS67 or higher by professional grading services, has sold for over $1,000. That's not because the coin is rare in general, it's because perfect examples are extremely hard to find. Most pennies from 1988 were heavily used, scratched, dented, or tarnished. Finding one that looks as fresh as the day it left the mint is like finding a needle in a haystack. In one auction, a certified MS67 red 1988 penny sold for around $1,400. Another example graded MS66 brought in over $500. These are ordinary coins, no errors, just flawless condition. That alone shows how powerful preservation can be in the coin world. Error coins from this year have done even better. A well-known double-die 1988 penny variety sold for over $2,000 at auction. Off-metal strikes, where the coin was accidentally struck on the wrong type of metal blank, have also reached high three-figure and low four-figure prices when authenticated. So how do you know if your 1988 penny is real and possibly valuable? First, look at the front of the coin. Under Abraham Lincoln's chin, you'll see the year 1988. If there is no letter next to the date, that means it was minted in Philadelphia, which is exactly what we want. A small D would mean Denver. A small S would mean San Francisco. For this coin, no mint mark is standard. Next, examine the condition. Is the coin shiny with sharp details, or is it dull and worn? Coins with clear facial features, sharp lettering, and full memorial steps on the back are worth more than flat, damaged ones. Now grab a magnifying glass or zoom in with your phone camera. Look closely at the letters in Liberty, the date, and In God We Trust. Do any letters look doubled, thickened, or shadowed? If so, you may have a double die variety, and that's where serious collector interest begins. Also inspect the surface for bubbling, peeling copper, or exposed gray metal. That could indicate plating errors. Check the edges for unusual shapes, missing sections, or uneven rims. And here's an important tip: never clean your coin. Even light cleaning can destroy collector value instantly. A dirty coin is often worth more than a shiny one that's been scrubbed. Now, let's clear up a common myth. Many people believe that all old pennies are worth money. That's not true. Age alone doesn't create value. Rarity, condition, and errors do. The 1988 penny is not rare by mintage numbers, billions were made, but rare versions absolutely exist. And since most people overlook modern pennies, some valuable pieces are still sitting in jars, drawers, and piggy banks today. Here's a surprising fact. The Lincoln Memorial on the back of the penny actually contains a tiny image of Lincoln inside the building. It's one of the few U.S. coins that shows the same person on both sides, front and back, at the same time. Most people never notice this detail, even after handling pennies their entire lives. Another fun detail is that the zinc core inside modern pennies means they can corrode faster if damaged. When the copper plating breaks, the zinc reacts with moisture and air, causing swelling and bubbling. While this usually hurts value, in some cases, dramatic plating errors become collectible. Collectors love the 1988 penny because it represents the modern era of U.S. coinage, a time when coins were no longer precious metal, but still held artistic and historical significance. It's also part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series, which remains the longest continuously minted coin design in U.S. history. But more than that, collectors love this coin because it reminds them that treasure doesn't always come in gold bars or ancient artifacts. Sometimes it comes in the form of everyday change. Coins pass through thousands of hands, quietly carrying stories most people never stop to hear. Imagine someone in 1988 using this penny to buy candy, drop it into a tip jar, or toss it into a couch cushion. Decades later, that same coin could be sitting in your home right now, waiting to be discovered. And here's the most exciting part. People are still finding rare 1988 pennies today. Coin roll hunters regularly report error finds from this year. Estate collections continue to surface high-grade examples, and online auctions constantly surprise bidders with unexpected results. So before you dismiss that jar of old change, take a closer look. That 1988 penny with no mint mark might be just another cent, or it might be something far more interesting. In the end, the 1988 Lincoln penny teaches us something powerful. Value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Sometimes it sits unnoticed for decades. And sometimes it waits for someone curious enough to ask a simple question: what is this really worth? Because the next time you hear a penny drop, it just might be dropping into history. Most people would walk past this penny without a second thought, but one version of the 1992 Lincoln Cent has sold for more than some brand new cars. And the wild part, it looks almost exactly like an ordinary penny you might still have in a jar at home. Let's talk about the 1992 Mint Mark Lincoln penny coin, a small piece of copper-coated zinc that tells a much bigger story about American money, hidden rarities, and the surprising power of tiny mistakes. The 1992 penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why you'll see a small D under the date on the front of the coin. At first glance, it looks just like millions of other Lincoln cents. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait face is right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just a normal-looking penny from the early 1990s. But sometimes, the most valuable coins aren't the ones that scream rare. They're the ones that quietly slip into circulation unnoticed and stay hidden for decades. To understand why the 1992 penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1990s. By that time, pennies were no longer made of solid copper. Rising metal prices had forced the U.S. Mint to switch in 1982 to a zinc core coated with thin copper plating. That made pennies cheaper to produce, but visually, they still looked almost identical to older copper cents. In 1992, the Denver Mint struck over 4 billion Lincoln cents. That's billion with a B. These coins were meant for everyday use: grocery change, parking meters, tip jars, nothing more. Nobody at the time was thinking about future collector value. They were just pennies doing penny things. But behind the scenes, the Mint was experimenting with design details. Subtle changes were being prepared for future years, including adjustments to lettering and spacing on the reverse side of the coin. Most of these experiments never left the building, but once in a while, one did. And that's where the legend of the rare 1992 penny begins. Let's look closely at the design. On the front, or obverse, we see Abraham Lincoln's portrait, originally designed by Victor David Brenner in 1909. Above Lincoln's head is the word liberty, and in front of his face is the phrase "In God we trust." Below is the date 1992, and under that the small D mint mark. On the reverse, you see the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., with the words United States of America across the top, 1 cent at the bottom, and EPLURIBUS above the building. But here's where things get interesting. On most 1992 pennies, if you look closely at the words America and States on the reverse, you'll see that the letters are spaced apart. There's a noticeable gap between the A and M in America. This spacing style had been used for years. However, in 1993, the Mint introduced a new reverse design with tighter lettering. The letters in America almost touch. This is known among collectors as the close AM design, compared to the older wide AM. Now here's the twist. Some pennies dated 1992 were accidentally struck using the newer 1993 style reverse dies. These coins were never supposed to exist, but a tiny number escaped into circulation anyway. And those few coins became some of the most famous modern penny errors in American history. Most of the attention has gone to the 1992 close AM penny without a mint mark, struck in Philadelphia, but a much smaller number were struck at the Denver Mint, the 1992 D close AM, and these are even rarer. To the naked eye, the difference is extremely subtle, but under magnification, you can see that the letters A and M in America nearly touch, instead of having a clear space between them. Another clue is in the designer's initials. On most 1992 pennies, the initials FG, for Frank Gasparo, sit far from the base of the Lincoln Memorial. On the close AM variety, those initials sit closer to the building. These tiny details are what separate a 1-cent coin from a four-figure collectible. Now let's talk about value, because this is where the story gets exciting. A normal 1992 D penny in circulated condition is worth exactly 1 cent, maybe 2 or 3 cents if it's shiny and uncirculated. Nothing special. But a confirmed 1992 D close AM penny, that's a different story. Only a handful are known to exist. Some estimates suggest fewer than 10 examples have ever been verified. That kind of scarcity instantly puts the coin into elite collector territory. One example sold at auction for several $1,000s, even in lightly circulated condition. Higher-grade examples have sold for much more, sometimes reaching into the five-figure range depending on condition and demand at the time of sale. That's not just rare. That's life-changing for a penny someone might have pulled out of pocket change. And what makes it even more fascinating is that most of these coins were discovered years after 1992, sometimes decades later, by ordinary people sorting through old jars, rolls from the bank, or inherited coin collections. That's why collectors still search through pennies today, not because most are valuable, but because a few are. Now, let's talk about how to tell if you might have one. First, check the date. It must say 1992. Second, look for the mint mark. Under the date, you should see a small D. That means it was struck in Denver. Third, and this is the most important step, flip the coin over and look at the word America above the Lincoln Memorial. If the A and M are clearly separated, it's the normal wide AM version, and it's not rare. But if the A and M are almost touching, with barely any space, you may be looking at the rare close AM variety. Next, look at the initials FG on the right side of the memorial at the bottom. On the close AM coins, these initials sit closer to the base of the building. If your coin matches these features, do not clean it, do not polish it, and don't assume it's real without professional confirmation. Counterfeits exist, and some people attempt to alter coins by filing or modifying letters. A professional coin grading service is the only way to know for sure. That said, finding one of these in the wild is extremely unlikely but not impossible, and that's what keeps collectors searching. Now, here's something even more interesting. The U.S. Mint has never officially acknowledged producing the 1992 close AM penny, either from Philadelphia or Denver. These coins are considered accidental strikes, meaning they weren't planned, documented, or released intentionally. That makes them even more mysterious. Somewhere inside the mint, a reverse die meant for 1993 production was installed too early and used briefly before being noticed and replaced. But by then, a small batch of coins had already entered circulation. No records, no announcements, just silent mistakes that turned into collector legends. And that's one of the most fascinating parts of modern coin collecting, not kings, not ancient empires, but tiny factory errors that slip through quality control and quietly rewrite history. Another fun detail. Most people assume rare coins must be old, from the 1800s or early 1900s. But this coin is from 1992, a year many people still clearly remember. Some viewers watching this right now were alive when this coin was made, and may have spent one without realizing what it was. That emotional connection, knowing something rare passed through everyday hands, is part of what makes modern era coins so powerful. Collectors also love this coin because it's challenging. Unlike flashy errors like double dates or off-center strikes, this one requires careful observation. It rewards patience, attention to detail, and curiosity. It turns ordinary pocket change into a treasure hunt. And even if you never find one, the search itself becomes part of the fun. Another surprising fact: the 1992 close AM penny is considered more valuable than many gold coins, rare silver dollars, and early 20th century issues, simply because so few exist. Value in coin collecting isn't just about age or metal. It's about rarity, demand, and story. And this coin has all three. It's rare because only a handful are known. It's in demand because collectors want complete Lincoln cent varieties. And its story, a silent mint mistake hiding in plain sight, makes it unforgettable. Even the normal 1992 D penny still plays an important role in American coin history. It represents the final years of the Lincoln Memorial reverse design, which would soon be replaced by the Lincoln bicentennial designs in 2009. It also reflects the era of zinc-based cents, mass production, and modern minting efficiency. Billions were struck, but only a few became legendary. And that contrast between mass production and extreme rarity is what gives this coin its magic. So what should you do if you think you found one? First, handle it carefully by the edges. Second, use a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom to check the America spacing. Third, compare it to known images of close AM coins from reputable sources. And if it still looks right, consider sending it to a professional grading service for authentication. Only certified examples carry serious market value. But even if it turns out not to be rare, you've still gained something valuable: knowledge. And in the world of coin collecting, knowledge is often the first step toward discovery. Because the truth is, most rare coins are found by people who weren't looking for treasure. They were just curious enough to look closely. And that brings us back to the 1992 D Lincoln penny, a coin designed to be ordinary, a mistake that was never meant to exist, a handful of survivors hiding in collections, drawers, and old jars, and a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones we've already passed through our hands. So the next time you get change, pause for just a second. Look at the date. Look at the letters. Look at the details. Because history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it looks exactly like a penny. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance. But what if I told you that a simple 2000 Lincoln penny with no mint mark could be sitting in your home right now, and might be worth far more than 1 cent? Some examples have shocked collectors, not because they're old, but because of what went wrong when they were made. Let's talk about the 2000 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks ordinary, but hides a story that surprises even experienced collectors. First, what exactly is this coin? The 2000 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday. By the year 2000, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for over 90 years, making it the longest-running design in U.S. coin history. A no-mint mark, penny means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Coins made in Philadelphia traditionally do not carry a mint mark, unlike coins made in Denver which carry a D, or San Francisco, which usually carry an S. In the year 2000, millions of pennies were produced, so at first glance this coin doesn't sound rare at all. But as we'll soon discover, not all 2000 pennies are the same, and some are dramatically more valuable than others. Now let's go back in time. The year 2000 was a major milestone in American history. It marked the start of a new millennium, and the U.S. Mint was operating at full speed to keep up with everyday coin demand. Pennies were still heavily used in daily transactions, grocery stores, gas stations, vending machines, and billions were struck every year. In 2000 alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 4 billion Lincoln cents. That's billion with a B. These coins were meant for circulation, not collectors. No special celebration designs were issued that year, and no one at the time believed the 2000 penny would ever attract attention. But sometimes, history doesn't begin when a coin is made. Sometimes, history begins when something goes wrong. Let's take a closer look at the coin itself. The 2000 Lincoln penny is made of 97.5% zinc with a thin copper coating. This composition began in 1982 when copper became too expensive for solid copper pennies. So while it looks like copper, the inside core is actually zinc. On the front, or obverse, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right. This design was created by Victor David Brenner and has been used on pennies for more than a century, making it one of the most recognized coin designs in the world. You'll see the word Liberty on the left side, the date 2000 on the right, and In God We Trust along the top rim. On the back, or reverse, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 and used until 2008. If you look closely at the memorial steps, you can even see a tiny seated Lincoln statue inside the building. Everything about this coin looks ordinary, but collectors know that sometimes the most valuable coins are the ones that don't look special at all until you examine them closely. So why is the 2000 no mint mark Lincoln penny interesting to collectors? The answer lies in mint errors and rare variations. While most 2000 pennies are only worth face value, certain error coins from this year have become extremely desirable. These errors occurred during the minting process, when something went wrong with the metal, the dies, or the striking pressure, creating coins that were never meant to exist. One of the most famous error varieties from this year is the 2000 wide AM penny. On standard Lincoln Memorial pennies, the letters A and M in the word America on the reverse are very close together, almost touching. But on some 2000 pennies, those letters are noticeably separated. This is known as the wide AM variety, and it happened because a proof reverse die was accidentally used on circulation coins. Proof dies are normally reserved for special collector coins made with extra care and detail. When one of those dies ended up striking regular pennies, it created a rare and valuable variety that slipped into circulation unnoticed. And because these coins were mixed in with billions of normal pennies, some people unknowingly spent them, while others kept them in jars, drawers, and coin rolls without realizing what they had. Another valuable error seen in 2000 pennies includes off-center strikes, double dies, and wrong planchet errors, where the coin is struck on metal meant for a different denomination. These errors are far less common than normal coins, and collectors are willing to pay serious money for them. So how valuable can a 2000 no mint mark penny actually be? In most cases, A regular circulated example is worth exactly 1 cent. But that changes fast if the coin has the right features and condition. Let's start with the wide AM variety. A circulated 2000 wide AM penny can sell for anywhere from $20 to over $75 depending on condition. In uncirculated condition, prices often jump into the $100 to $300 range. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold for even more, sometimes exceeding $500. That's not life-changing money, but for a penny pulled from pocket change, it's an incredible return. Now let's talk about error coins. A 2000 penny struck off-center by 10 to 20% can sell for $40 to $150. Coins with dramatic off-center strikes where the date is still visible can bring even higher prices. Double die errors, where parts of the design appear doubled, can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100 depending on strength and visibility. Wrong planchet errors are some of the most exciting. In rare cases, a penny from 2000 has been found struck on a dime blank or another foreign metal blank. These can sell for several $100 and in extreme cases, over $1,000. One certified 2000 Lincoln cent error struck on a foreign planchet sold at auction for over $1,200, all because it slipped through the minting process unnoticed. So while the average 2000 penny isn't valuable, the right one absolutely can be. Now let's talk about how you can identify a valuable 2000 no mint mark penny. First, check the front of the coin. If there's no mint mark below the date it was struck in Philadelphia, that's exactly what we're looking for. Next, flip the coin over and look at the word America. Focus on the space between the A and the M. If the letters are clearly separated instead of nearly touching, you may have a wide AM variety. This is the most important visual clue and the one most collectors miss. Then examine the coin's condition. Look for strong detail in Lincoln's hair, sharp lettering, and minimal wear. The better the condition, the more valuable the coin becomes. After that, check for errors. Look for doubling in the letters or numbers, especially on Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date. Look for off-center strikes, clipped edges, or unusual thickness or weight. If the coin looks different, feels different, or doesn't match others from the same year, that's a sign to investigate further. Now let's talk about fakes, because yes, even modern pennies get faked. Most counterfeit attempts involve altering the letters in America to make a normal coin look like the wide AM variety. Some people file or reshape the letters to create artificial spacing. A genuine wide AM will have naturally shaped letters with smooth edges, proper spacing, and no tool marks. The coin should also match correct weight and thickness. If something looks rough, uneven, or damaged around the letters, it's likely been altered. Professional grading services like PCGS or NGC can authenticate your coin and confirm whether it's genuine. If you believe you have a valuable example, getting it certified protects you and increases its resale value. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 2000 Lincoln penny. Most people assume rare coins have to be old, like from the 1800s or early 1900s. But the 2000 penny proves that rarity doesn't depend on age. It depends on mistakes, scarcity, and collector demand. Another surprising fact is that many wide AM pennies were found in circulation years after they were minted. Some people discovered them in pocket change, others in coin rolls from banks, and some in jars that had been sitting untouched for over a decade. Even more surprising, most people who found them at first didn't know what they had. Many were spent again, gone forever, because no one thought to look closely at a penny from the year 2000. That's what makes this coin so fascinating. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight. Collectors also love the 2000 penny because it represents the transition into the modern era of U.S. coinage. It's a reminder of the turn of the millennium, a time of change, technology, and uncertainty, captured in something as simple as a cent. And unlike ultra-rare early copper coins that cost thousands of dollars to own, this is a collectible that anyone can search for. You don't need special equipment. You don't need to spend money. All you need is curiosity, patience, and a few spare pennies. That accessibility is part of what makes this coin so appealing. For many collectors, the 2000 no mint mark penny is a gateway coin, the kind that gets people hooked on searching change, learning about errors, and discovering the hidden world of modern coin collecting. It teaches an important lesson. Not all treasure is buried. Some of it is sitting quietly in a jar on your dresser. Now let's imagine this. Somewhere right now, there's a person unknowingly holding a 2000 wide AM penny in their wallet. They'll use it to buy coffee. Someone else will receive it in change. Maybe it'll sit in a cup holder. Maybe it'll end up in a drawer. But if the right person looks closely, that 1 cent coin becomes a $100 discovery. That's the magic of modern numismatics. And this is why collectors continue to search rolls, inspect pocket change, and carefully examine everyday coins. Because history doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. The 2000 no mint mark Lincoln penny isn't rare because of its age. It's rare because of its mistakes. And those mistakes turn something ordinary into something extraordinary. So the next time you see a penny from the year 2000, don't ignore it. Flip it over. Check the letters. Look closely. Because you might be holding a piece of modern American history and maybe even a surprisingly valuable one. And here's the most fascinating part. Every single day, millions of people handle pennies without looking at them. But somewhere among those coins, a few rare examples are still waiting to be found. And one of them might be yours.